The only piece of trace evidence she had in her possession was the vial of strange black ash Mulder had fished out of Nancy Scheck's swimming pool. Scully heard a knock on the door, and Berlina Luquat came in, holding a folder full of papers. "Here are your results. Special delivery for you, Agent Scully." "Already?" Scully said, surprised. "What, you want me to pack it in dry ice and send it UPS?" Berlina laughed. Scully gratefully took the folder. But before she could say anything else, Berlina spun about and marched back down the hall. Scully flipped open the biological analysis folder and scanned through the analysis summary, paging to the end, interested only in the final result for now. Her stomach sank. The black powdery sample was indeed human ash, almost completely incinerated. Human ash exposed to high radiation, something like 40 years ago, mixed with a black, grainy sand. Sand, ash, radiation. Scully sat down heavily in her seat and tapped her fingernails on the folder. Then she picked up the phone. She couldn't put it off any further. Mulder was going to love this. Kamita Imports, Honolulu, Hawaii, Tuesday, 12:17 p.m. Inside the Kamita Imports office building, Muriel waited for the receptionist to announce her arrival. Muriel had known Ryan Kamita for a year. She had met him immediately after her own revelations had turned her against nuclear weapons work, transforming her into a vehement protester. The extravagant funding Kamita donated anonymously from the coffers of his successful imports business had kept Stop Nuclear Madness free of financial worries during its entire lifetime. From their first meeting, Muriel realized that she and the scarred blind man had many things in common, eerily so. Still, his very presence sent a thrill of fear through her. She couldn't understand his offhanded acceptance of his tragic fate, but he swept her doubts away with his strange charisma. Once learning of Ryan Kamita's power and his generosity and his personal drive, Muriel had promised herself that she would not come back to this benefactor except under the direst emergency. Circumstances now warranted such a visit. Ryan Kamita emerged from his back offices. He was led by the receptionist, but he maintained only the slightest touch on her shoulder, simply an acknowledgement that he required her to guide him. His eyes were milky, the color of a half-cooked egg. His face was scarred like the bust of a very proud man done by a poorly trained sculptor. Kamita cocked his head to one side, as if he could detect Muriel's presence from the faint perfume in the deodorant soap she used, or the sound of her breathing. Muriel wondered if he had more abilities than he let on. "Mr. Kamita," she said, standing up. "Ryan, it's good of you to see me on such short notice." He came forward, homing in on the sound of her voice and releasing his grip on the receptionist, who took his action as a matter of course. Muriel Bremen, what a pleasant surprise. It's good of you to come all the way to the islands just to see me. I was about to go to my greenhouse for lunch. Would you join me?" "Yes, I would," she said. "We have certain things to discuss." "I'm sorry to hear that," he said. "Or am I pleased?" "No, you're sorry," she said. "Definitely sorry." "I'm afraid the news is bad, Ryan," she blurted before he even took his seat. Though she had met him accidentally, Muriel somehow held the uncertain suspicion that he had set up the entire encounter himself, and that he was even now playing things out exactly the way he wanted them. She shuddered and hunched her shoulders as she bent over her salad. When she had turned away from her mentor, Emile Gregory, Muriel had looked to Kamita as a new supporter, someone who shared her vehement beliefs. Ryan Kamita knew an enormous amount about nuclear weapons testing, about the entire military industry. He was someone to whom she could divulge the dire designs concocted by unenlightened weapons designers, some of which were passed along to her through a few sympathetic workers who remained at the Teller research facility. Muriel had told Kamita everything without qualms about spilling classified information. She had devoted her life to the cause. She had responded to a higher calling, and she knew what she was doing was right. Now the time had come for it all to reach its climax. If they could not stop Bright Anvil soon, then all their efforts were simply smoke blown in the eyes of people who wanted to believe. "Everything has failed," Muriel said. The government has a momentum behind what it decides to do, and no one, not me, not you, can stop it once it's started. I take it that means that no one has heard our complaints. Oh, they've heard them all right, Muriel said. They just don't pay attention to them. It's like a gnat buzzing in their ear. The blind man sighed, and his scarred face slumped. Muriel continued. The Bright Anvil test is going ahead anyway, even without Dr. Gregory. Somewhere out in the Marshall Islands, an abandoned atoll. Ryan Cometa sat up sharply, alarmed. I know, he said. Anika Atoll. That's where it will take place. How did you know? She asked, astonished. How could it not take place there? He practically shouted. Our greatest nightmares are about to unfold. The Pentagon, Arlington, Virginia, Wednesday, 10 a.m. Following a hunch, Mulder went to see Nancy Scheck's friend, Brigadier General Matthew Bradukas, in his Pentagon office. The Brigadier General stood from behind his desk and extended a beefy hand. His wide face looked as if it had been deflated of self-confidence. I've been expecting you, Agent Mulder. The General's reddened eyes gave him the appearance of not having slept well in recent nights. Frankly, I thought you would refuse to see me, General, Mulder said. Some people don't want me looking into certain aspects of this murder investigation. On the contrary, Bradukas sat back down and squeezed his hands together as if he wanted to pop all his knuckles simultaneously. His face took on a deeply serious expression. Agent Mulder, we both know something highly unusual is going on here. I can't say this in any official capacity, but I think your willingness to accept certain things that others merely laugh at could be a great advantage in this investigation. That got Mulder's attention. General Bradukas continued. I know one of your operating theories in this investigation is that some new weapon under development at the Teller Research Facility was triggered in Dr. Gregory's lab. Believe me when I tell you this, Agent Mulder. I work at the highest levels of the Defense Department. I can tell with utter certainty that no weapon we are currently considering or have under development can do this. So it doesn't have anything to do with Bright Anvil? Mulder asked, fishing. Not in that sense, the General answered, then took a deep breath. What do you mean, not in that sense? Mulder asked. The General sighed. Nancy Scheck was in charge of the Department of Energy oversight on the entire Bright Anvil project, and Dr. Gregory was the lead scientist. The test of the prototype device is scheduled to go off in a small atoll in the Marshall Islands sometime in the next few days. The Anika Atoll has a bit of history of its own, but it's nothing you would have known about. Another hydrogen bomb test took place there in the 50s, though you won't find it in any record book. Sawtooth. It was kept quiet. It took place shortly after we went through such enormous efforts to clear those islanders off Bikini Atoll. In this instance, the scientists and the military were in a hurry, and the island wasn't as thoroughly checked as it should have been. There is some evidence that an entire group of natives was obliterated. My God, Mulder whispered. Sick horror prevented him from saying anything else. The General waited, and finally Mulder said, And you think this tragedy on the atoll 40 years ago has something to do with these bizarre deaths today?